Did you know that we're hardwired for survival? As humans, we're constantly on the lookout for threats which trigger our survival instinct, our fight, flight, or freeze response. This is an amazing mechanism that was developed a long time ago and has allowed the survival of the human species. It was also formed way before the newest part of our brain, the intellectual part of our brain, was formed, before we even knew how to communicate. It was brilliant in helping us react really quickly when, let's say, faced with a saber-toothed tiger in the wild. And it's where you will find the ancient hormonal blueprint for birth. So everything that happens in birth, that hormonal play out that's meant to happen in birth, is actually it's already been formed a long time ago when we were meant to be birthing in the wild. And so I want to explore in this video how relevant that is to us today, how we can protect that, and why environment really matters. In birth, we've got this really delicate, intricate cocktail of hormones, and this balance can be really easily tipped by the triggering of our emergency response system, by the triggering of that fight or flight response. So this is anything that, from an animalistic point of view, not necessarily an intellectual point of view, makes us feel unsafe. For animals in the wild, this is really relevant. When they sense a predator is nearby, their fight or flight response triggers and kicks in, and that in turn slows down and stops labour hormones so that they can get to a safe place in order to birth their young safely. And what do we know? We are no different. Our birthing hormones and most of our physiology in birth is no different to other mammals. So what do we know about birthing hormones and nervous systems for birth? So the main hormone that you probably all know about already is oxytocin. Oxytocin is the hormone that we need in abundance and with increasing amounts from actually pregnancy, but in birth, in labour, there's the biggest build-up that we need in order to birth our babies. So we need oxytocin for birth to happen optimally and efficiently, for a normal physiological birth to happen. So oxytocin is typically produced when maybe you've had a really lovely hug from someone or one of your children. It's produced when we orgasm. It's produced when we breastfeed. So typically produced when we have connection from others and loved ones, actually. But it's also known as the shy hormone. So if you think about it, how many of us could actually orgasm in a room full of people watching us? Probably not many of us, I'm going to go out on a whim and say. So it's the shy hormone. That also explains why people are quite often happy to sing in the shower, but not in front of other people, because you feel safe and enclosed and protected. So it's the shy hormone, it's the hormone of love. It's produced when we're in our calm response system, as is another important hormone, our beta endorphins. And they are our pain relieving hormones. They're super effective, and who doesn't want them at birth? So oxytocin, endorphins, produced when we're in our calm response system, and we know we need oxytocin in order for labour to build for us to birth our babies. So we want oxytocin. Also, what we know when we're in our calm response system is that all our blood is flowing to our major organs. So, of course, we want our blood flowing to our uterus when it's working really hard to birth a baby. The opposite of that, so being in our emergency response system, where we have adrenaline running through our body, is that The blood is running to our limbs to get us ready to run or fight. I don't think anyone is really going to be wanting to do that in labour, and that is not going to be producing a baby at the end. So we know that we want oxytocin. We know that oxytocin is produced when we're in our calm response system. And so let's have a look at what environments are gonna help us stay in that calm response system and optimize the increasing production of oxytocin in the body. So let's have a think. What environment is best for making you feel comfortable and at ease and safe, essentially? Normally, for most of us, that is with familiar people, familiar sounds, maybe your loved one or loved people. It's normally where you can have access to your own kitchen, and a big one is bathroom and toilet. Quite often people are triggered into their emergency response systems when they know there's not a toilet nearby. So actually your creature comforts are something that makes most of us feel safe and at ease and comfortable. Other things might be not a particularly brightly lit room. Warmth normally makes us feel safe and secure. And also the really important aspect of knowing that you are in the safety and the privacy of your own home, right? Knowing that you're safe from not just anybody, any strangers entering your house. Now let's think of this scenario. A brightly lit room or rooms, fluorescent lighting, a cold environment, sterile smells or unfamiliar smells, sterile fabrics, unfamiliar, uncomfortable fabrics, unknown to you, unfamiliar people, unfamiliar voices, no access to your own kitchen or your own bathroom. And a really, really important one, as we mentioned on the flip side, is imagine a scenario where you don't know who could walk into your room and you don't know who might do something to you. So in what scenario or in what environment do you think that we would be producing the shy hormones, the hormones of love, and your happy hormones? In what environment are we producing hormones that are conducive to an optimalized, normal physiological birth? So what we can see from looking at those two different scenarios is that oxytocin is typically produced when we feel safe, when we feel unobserved, and we're in a familiar environment. We know that oxytocin is in abundance when we have those basic things met. And we know that when oxytocin is in full flow, that birth can happen efficiently and optimally and more comfortably. That's an important one. Are there techniques to help you get back into that calm response system or trigger you back into your zone? Yeah, there are techniques, and I'm going to share one of them at the end of this video, a really, really simple one. But ultimately, the aim in birth should really be to not interrupt that hormonal flow, to not have the need to constantly have to take yourself back into that zone, for your birth partner not to have to keep taking you back into your calm response system. An ideal birth setting, an optimal birth setting, is one where we can let the hormones of labour unfold, where we feel safe, where we feel secure, where we feel private and unobserved. Another really interesting thing about oxytocin is that it's produced in the blood and in the brain. So oxytocin goes to the brain, but it's also produced in the brain. And what we have here is this positive feedback loop. So it's very different from other systems in the body where we have homeostasis, which is basically where our body regulates. So if something gets too high, something happens to bring that back down again. So we have this constant sort of state of balance in the body. Birth actually works very differently. We want the bigger and bigger buildup of oxytocin until it reaches its peak, at which point we do then want the catecholamines, which are the adrenaline sort of hormones, to suddenly be triggered in order for us to birth our baby. So we need those hormones at that particular time so that we can be alert and we can catch our baby and we can observe our baby from a point of, is it in optimal health and are we safe? And again, you can see that this is something that's been designed in our mammalian brain. This has been designed from when we used to birth in the wild, and that we would need to then be quickly on high alert to make sure that we were safe. So going back to that positive feedback loop, what we have is oxytocin produced by the triggering of surges, painful sensations, strong sensations in the uterus, which trigger oxytocin in the brain, and oxytocin is then produced in the brain, which also plays into our reward and pleasure system in the brain, which also makes birth more comfortable and helps us endure the intensity and sensations of birth. So we have this sort of positive feedback loop where oxytocin is produced from these strong sensations in the uterus, which then triggers more oxytocin production in the brain, which then hooks onto the oxytocin receptors in the uterus to make that trigger and surge and contract again. So we have this constant feedback loop, and that's what we want. So Dr. Sarah Buckley is an obstetrician who is an expert on the birthing hormones, on oxytocin, on normal physiological birth, and she's done a lot of research and studies around it. Really recommend you having a look at her work. And she has spoken about oxytocin as being a little bit like this snowball, where it starts off small, let's say at the beginning of labour. Actually, we know that starts off in pregnancy, but it starts off smaller at the beginning of labour and it's slowly gaining momentum. And at this point in time where it's still in its sort of early stages, it's a bit more precarious. So that momentum can be much more easily disrupted than when it's big and it's gained full momentum. Right, so we've got this positive feedback loop, we're getting more and more oxytocin, the snowball's getting bigger and bigger and bigger until we reach this peak, and then more hormones, different hormones to help us expel our baby. Amazing. But what happens with regards to that snowball in the meanwhile in relation to interruptions in the birth environment and where we are, who's with us, etc. So let's explore that. If during those early stages of that snowball in momentum, we have an interruption in the birth, in the calm response system, so that could be an early trip into hospital before, well, a trip into hospital, let's say, but we're talking about in the early stages. So an early trip into hospital, an early visit from a medical professional or any sort of professional actually, or any stranger. That is, as we know, from a mammalian point of view, going to trigger our emergency response system. Adrenaline kicks in, oxytocin production stops or slows down at this point. So the snowball, when it's small and it's in its precarious stages, can very easily be triggered into stopping or slowing down labour. Now, what happens when we are kicked into that emergency response system and the snowball is too big? Well, when the snowball is too big, that there's just no going back, it's already got too much momentum to stop or slow down, those catecholamines can then be triggered, which sends a response to our body to birth our baby now. So on a very simple terms, when that snowball is interrupted at the early stages, what's happening is signals to your brain saying, this is not safe for me, this is not a safe place, or I'm not around safe people to release my baby, it's not ready yet. I'm going to just stop until I feel safe and ready to do that. When it's at the bigger stages and that is interrupted and that response system kicks in, it's then saying, it's too late to go back, I'm going to birth this baby now. I'm getting this baby out now. That is the safest thing for me to do. So remember those stories that you might have heard, or the videos that you might have seen of women birthing in the car on the way to hospital, birthing in the car park of the hospital, I've seen a few of those, and birthing in the elevator, I've also seen a few of those. This is our body's incredible innate wisdom of saying, I'm getting this baby out now. Or in the earlier stages, holding on to this baby, this is not safe. Our bodies are so intelligent, but unfortunately, when this process is interrupted, as it often is in the really early stages, what happens then is that we are labelled, or women's bodies are labelled as failure to progress. This is hugely demoralising and just downright a terrible understanding of birth and how birth works, in my opinion. Actually, it's not failure to progress. It's our body's really, really clever inbuilt response to something that makes us feel unsafe, to something that makes us feel as though we are birthing in the wild and we are doing everything at all costs to protect that baby. And so rather than failure to progress, what I like to label it as is failure to be in an optimal environment with safe people, safe environment, in order to release my baby. Nothing to do with your body being a failure. Actually, your body has done exactly what it's meant to do in that instance. So before I go into my last little tip for getting back into a calm response system, I just want to finish on this thought. And no matter how much we think that we might be safer in a medical system on an intellectual level, your hormonal blueprint is almost definitely saying otherwise. So it's just a little food for thought, something to think about. And I'm going to leave you with this brilliant breathing technique, and it is so, so simple. This is just one of the breathing techniques that I teach on my hypnobirthing and radical birth education course, and it's great for you to do on your own or with your birth partner. And the trick of it really is that you will have practiced it leading up to your birth. This is something that needs to become second nature to you, so that if you do find yourself in your fight or flight response with any sort of fear, or your safety being triggered, then if you've practiced this and it feels like second nature, it'll be much easier to drop into it and trigger that calm response system. So the trick of it is, we're going to breathe in for 4 through the nose, and we're going to breathe out for 7 or 8, ideally through the nose. And just breathing out through the nose just keeps the breath focused, and it helps to slow it down. However, if you're having trouble breathing through your nose, do it through your mouth. It's totally fine. Don't stress about it. The key is just really that you've practiced it lots. And this will serve you immensely in between your surges. So let's do this. Just begin by gently closing your eyes, or just finding a low gaze point on the floor. Take a breath in and just give a sigh out. Take a moment to just let relaxation spread through your forehead, down over your nose, across your cheeks, into your jaw, just see if you can just drop those shoulders anymore. And we're going to breathe in through the nose for 4. Breathing in, 2, 3, 4, and out through the nose, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In, 2, 3, 4, out through the nose, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So a really, really simple breathing technique. You can just practice it for 2 minutes at several points throughout the day, or whenever you just feel you need to drop into that calm and trigger your oxytocin. The idea is to double the out breath roughly if you can. If you can't do 4-7, just stretch to 3-5 for now, that's totally fine. And just try and remember that on the out breath, we're just smoothing out the forehead, releasing tension in the jaw, and releasing tension across the shoulders and the back of the neck. I'll leave you with that. And if you want to know more, come join me over at www.nakedbirth.co.uk and have a look at which one of my courses might be right for you, either a full radical birth education and hypnobirthing course or a mini home birth confidence coaching course, and there are some others on there as well. I hope this has been helpful. I hope it's given you some food for thought, and I can't wait to hear how you found it.